Today is a perfect day for us to talk about all those features that were in previous Souls games but didn't make it to Dark Souls 3. Yes, today we'll talk about downgrades, but before we get to the actual facts and comparison, I have to specify a thing. I don't really care about story, atmosphere, and all that stuff. I'm here today to talk about mechanics and features. We're talking about some features and neat little gimmicks that were in other Souls games, yet they're absent in Dark Souls 3 for no apparent reason. And yes, as you might have guessed, my main point of interest is still Dark Souls PvP. But don't let this confuse you, a downgrade is still a downgrade, it's a drop in depth and quality. No matter how irrelevant those features are for PvE, PvP, or you. So yeah, I care about those features, and today we're gonna be discussing those features. First, I have to give you a brief rundown of what was happening to FROMSOFT and why this comparison is actually relevant. It's not hard to guess that I intend to compare Dark Souls 3 to Dark Souls 2 because, well, it's fair. Dark Souls 2 was released in 2014, so FROMSOFT had 2 whole years to polish Dark Souls 3. Sure, you may argue that Bloodborne had a go in this brawl since it was released in between Dark Souls 2 and 3, but I'm not buying this. Demon's Souls is a fantastic game and it's still my favorite game in the series, yet it took FROMSOFT only 2 years to upgrade it to Dark Souls, so I have my doubts about time being a factor here. Being really into Dark Souls PvP, I can't help but notice that there are several crucial features that did not make it to the game. Plenty of great mechanics that were first implemented in Dark Souls 2 are gone now. I won't hesitate to go as far as saying that those mechanics are the reason why Dark Souls 2 is actually a good game. So my first question is, what the hell has happened to proper dual wielding? What was even wrong with it? It was such a great mechanic that expanded build variety and weapon variety, or even both. It allowed you to combine 2 useless weapons into something more useful, or just create new setups and adjust movesets on the fly. It just baffles me. Why, instead of having expanded and improved dual wielding with proper stance setups and other cool stuff, we get absolutely retarded offhand blocking in Dark Souls 3. Anything would be better than what we have right now in Dark Souls 3. Hell, just copy the system from Dark Souls 2. It would have been more beneficial than allowing us to use S-Stock for blocking and offhand. Speaking of movesets, what the hell has happened to unique movesets? Why does every greatsword has to swing in the same way? It's boring, it's stupid, and it's lazy. Look at how Dark Souls 2 deals with this. Sure, it doesn't apply to every weapon, but there are plenty of weapons within one class that have totally different movesets. This gives you an incentive to experiment and use various weapons within the same class for the sake of having fun, variety, whatever. You can see how bad the issue is if you look at almost any weapon class in Dark Souls 3. Most of those weapons have exact same moveset. Sure, weapon arts do some kind of a job trying to spice things up, but it's just not enough, especially seeing how slow and useless some of the weapon arts are in the game. In most cases, when it comes to Dark Souls 3, you just pick the weapon with most range and AR, which is just lame. Instead of making each weapon unique by giving it unique moves and properties, FROMSOFT gave us technically nothing. And the very same issue goes even deeper. Dark Souls 3 lacks any unique items in general. What has happened to gloves, boots, hats, and all that stuff giving you some extra bonuses? What's so bad about having unique gear? Maybe FROMSOFT have decided that it goes against Souls' philosophy, I don't really know, but I care. I miss all those cool, neat little items that would give you some crazy bonus or a special flavor. Those items had character to it. Now it's just boring because there's no mechanical difference between 2 pieces of armor. And this mechanical difference used to add extra bit of depth to customization. Another thing that bothers me a lot as a PvP player is lack of proper poise system. As much as I hated Dark Souls 1 kind of poise, I think Dark Souls 2 kind of poise was pretty close to being salvageable. Yet, Dark Souls 3 sees its release without any kind of poise system, and then half a year later FROMSOFT somehow managed to patch it in some half useful way, tying it up to hyper armor, which is actually something that Dark Souls 2 did as well, and it did it really well, much better than Dark Souls 3 does it. Instead of working on expanding those features, FROMSOFT have decided to cut corners and technically half us the game. And don't get me started on a billion of other small things that Dark Souls 2 has, like buff scaling with stats, ability to reduce stat requirements for miracles and spells and all that kind of craziness, being able to respec infinitely, or a proper counter hit system. Actually, let's talk about counter hits, because I think this is the best example of FROMSOFT being lazy. Why did we go from Dark Souls 2 with every weapon having its own unique counter hit modifier to Dark Souls 3, where only thrust attacks proc counter hits and they do fixed amount of bonus damage? Why? Those small things could have done so much for Dark Souls 3 and its longevity. Imagine FROMSOFT adjusting counter hit modifier for some obscure weapons, making them more attractive for PvP. Those small things, gimmicks and features are the depth. And after playing Dark Souls 2 for some time, Dark Souls 3 feels oversimplified, shallow and just plain boring. I can't help but feel like that most of those features should have been part of Dark Souls 3. Say, you don't like dual wielding, well then don't use it. I mean, there is really no reason not to have those things, because having proper poise or dual wielding won't ruin your PvE experience. And if something, it will only add to your PvP experience. At the end of the day, despite FROMSOFT doing some things right with Dark Souls 3, they dropped so many cool features, all while forgetting to fix some of the old problems that have been plaguing the game since its concept stage. I find it really hard to justify the outcome. You may argue, say, Dark Souls 3 has the best music, atmosphere, or PvE experience of all Souls games, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether I agree or not. What matters is that those features that were left behind had no way to ruin your experience. Yet we're stuck without proper dual wielding, enjoying 5 great swords that have the exact same moveset in the land of no poise. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.